Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of Data Champions Online Government. For those of you who are joining us for the first time today, welcome, and we hope that this will be the first of many Corinium events that you join. And for those of you who took part yesterday, welcome back. For those of you who don't know me, my name is James Bowater, and I am a production director here at Corinium. Before we jump into today's sessions, I need to take just a few moments of your time for a couple of housekeeping announcements. Firstly, each session today does have allocated time at the end of the presentation for your questions, so please do submit those using the Q&A module, which you'll find on your screens at the bottom. Click the Q&A button and you can submit your questions, which we'll tackle at the end. You don't need to wait until the end to submit them. Just as you think of them, type them in, and we'll go through them all at the end of the time for the presentation. We do also have some live polls during our presentations today, so make sure you take the opportunity to demonstrate your opinion, to share your experience. Just click the response, click submit on those, make sure you hit submit, and that will feed through to our live results, which the speaker will talk you through. In the unlikely event that you do have any technical issues, we hope that it shouldn't happen, but if you do, firstly, we recommend that you just refresh the page, and that solves most problems that you might encounter. So just go ahead, refresh the page, and hopefully that will solve it for you. If you try that and it doesn't work, you can also use that Q&A module to communicate with me and to communicate with the Corinium team, and we'll be happy to help you fix any other technical issues. So try a refresh. If that doesn't work, hit the Q&A module and let us know any issues you're having. You'll also notice on your screen that there's some downloadable links. Do check these out. They include our online and events, in-person events calendar. So do download that and review it at your leisure. That's the end of the housekeeping. So it's my pleasure now to introduce the first session of the day, which will be delivered by Jon Minkoff, who is the CDO of the Enforcement Bureau at the FCC. If you joined us yesterday, you'll know Jon moderated our panel yesterday and did a great job of it. And I'm delighted that he's going to join us again today, and this time to share his insights through a presentation on fostering a data-driven culture in a public sector environment. So, as I say, I'm delighted. Welcome back, Jon, and I'll hand over to you now, Jon.
Great. Thank you so much, James, for that introduction. So I am Jon Minkoff, CDO, Enforcement Bureau at the Federal Communications Commission. This is a role that I have been in for about 10 years. And I've got a lot of content to cover and not that much time to do it. So I will forego with kind of my background. But I will say that I love my job, and I'm very happy to be here today to talk to you about how to foster a data-driven culture in a public sector environment. Turning to the agenda, I've got 3 topics that I'd like to cover. Number 1, battling bureaucracy's innate inertia and overcoming that resistance to change. Number 2, securing buy-in, engaging all levels by successfully communicating the importance and power of data. And 3rd, improving data literacy for all, empowering your people by democratizing data. But before I turn to the first topic, I'd like to briefly discuss the federal data strategy. I think that the FDS is a great resource. Not only does it provide a roadmap for how the federal government can change its culture and make the best use of its data, but it also legitimizes the CDO in the world of IT. Developers can no longer sass people like me when I start howling about the need for good data governance. The FDS gives me and CDOs like me a place at the table. So I'm not going to discuss that many details of the FTS, except for the parts that apply expressly to creating a data culture. But I will note that the FTS action plan for the year 2020 spells out a number of deadlines, I think many of which were extended in May of this year because of the pandemic. But I am curious about how the pandemic has affected your agency's ability to meet those deadlines. So that is going to push us to the first poll of this presentation, which is, what effect has the pandemic had on reaching the many suggested deadlines of the 2020 FDS Action Plan? A is we can't begin to think about those deadlines until things return to normal after the pandemic. B, we're delayed, but only about 3 to 6 months. C, we're still on track, pandemic or not. We're barreling ahead. And D, you just don't know. I understand it takes a little time for these things to percolate in the hopper. All right. Well, I'm glad to see that people are still on track. We have no respondents that have put all the deadlines completely on the back burner, and people are still plowing ahead. They're either still on track, or they're 3 to 6 months, or over half the respondents just don't know. That's also fair. All right, turning to the first topic, battling bureaucracy's innate inertia. So here we have a graphical representation, and we have the status quo. And that status quo probably takes the form of people having a process or having systems, and maybe these systems are not that effective or efficient. And maybe they cause a lot of pain, but they are nonetheless the systems that are in place prior to you kind of coming on board and trying to solve problems. And so you come on board and you disrupt their world. I think that it's very important to recognize that your job at the outset is to communicate why things are changing. And it's also important to get through this disruptive period by promoting a culture that accepts a change and assists those that are stuck in the old world of doing things. So when you identify people that are using the new systems effectively, you want to stand those people up. And when you identify people that are maybe complaining or having a lot of trouble, you want to listen to those people and assist those people. Because you get to this point, hopefully quickly, to adoption, where people understand what is needed in the new world, and they start adopting it. And then you start rolling your way, hopefully swiftly up that results y-axis to the point where you start getting better results in the new world than you had in the old world, and you get to that point of maturity. The better that you articulate what the problem is that you're solving for, the easier it's going to become to get up this curve. New poll. It's a little bit earlier than I expected, but let me throw this out. This is just kind of my curiosity about how you're managing the IT projects in your agency. Are they mostly managed in-house with some help from outside contractors? Or B, are they mostly managed by the outside, and then you've got a few people on the inside that are kind of sitting at the table and providing feedback? Okay, well, our results show that everyone in the audience, 100%, are managed in-house with very little help from outside contractors. That is counterintuitive to me, but that's, I think, very cost-effective, and I'm happy to see those results. Turning back to presentation. So the last graph was the kind of textbook graphical representation of what introducing change looks like, and this is reality. Oftentimes, and in my experience as well, you introduce change, and no matter how hard you try, you get a very steep decline into the world of disruption. And then your adoption line looks a lot like this. You have good days and bad days, and then some days are a combination of all of it. And it's important to recognize that there is no guarantee that you get to this point of maturity. Your ability to get to that point of maturity is really dependent on your ability to explain why change is needed and to listen to and support the users and the middle managers that are really kind of on the front lines of using the new system and the new tools. And I think that the federal data strategy does a great job of providing 10 practices that allow you to get through this period and into the maturity. So as part of the FDS, they have a reference guide that lists 40 model data strategy practices. And the first 10 address building a data culture. And I've distilled these 10 model practices into 3 overarching categories. Practice 1, identifying data needs to answer the key questions. 4, using data to guide decision-making. And 6, conveying insights from data are the principles that really strike at the bread and butter of building a data culture. Right? These practices focus on the fact that data is an asset and it must be used and utilized to answer the mission-critical questions of the agency. Right? It's about identifying and prioritizing the agency's key questions and the data that's needed to answer them. It's about using new and effective tools to analyze and convey the insights from the data. And it's about plugging in the data to guide decisions. So I say it's the bread and butter because I believe that in order to change the culture, you have to find the biggest problems that strike at the heart of the organization's mission. And also to change culture, the new systems have to enable the agency to meet its mission better, and it should provide tools that work faster and with greater insight. Now, the second overarching category, in my estimation, is made up of the practices 2, which is assessing and balancing the needs of the stakeholders. 7, using data to increase accountability. 8, monitoring and addressing public perceptions. And I would actually edit that a little bit. I would say monitor and address internal and public perceptions. And 10, provide resources explicitly to leverage data assets. And here, for these practices, I think that you need a data council And this data council is made up of both IT and business process experts and the various stakeholder groups. All right, so this body is going to make decisions about upcoming projects and how to prioritize them. It will discuss the need for KPIs and other standards needed to increase accountability. And it will address internal and external feedback from users and stakeholders to ensure that the design and the assumptions that are used in the tools are accurate. And let me just highlight again, number 8, the monitoring and addressing internal and public perceptions. When going back to that, the graph that I had before, oh, hold on. All right, I'm going to skip that. I'm just going to describe it. Where you have the adoption curve, and you've got all the twists and turns. I think in my own experience, when we pushed out a new system bureau-wide in the Enforcement Bureau to manage and track our investigations, we listened intently to our users. And we had an intake system where people could comment and submit their criticism of the system that was ticketed, and we responded to each and every one of them. And what we learned is that there were some people that were squeaky wheels. And I created a rule in the system to push those tickets directly to my desk. And so I would either email or pick up the phone and talk with these people. And oftentimes their criticism was legitimate. And because we used agile methodology in order to develop this system, we were able to take their feedback and turn them into enhancements quickly in the system. And so what we were able to do was turn these people that were resistors into cheerleaders for the system. And that quickly changed the atmosphere and the culture that was starting to build up around this new environment. And it got us into greater adoption and ultimately into a very mature system, which we currently use. And then actually, before we go to this poll, the last kind of categorization of these principles are 3, 5, and 9. And this is, kind of crowing about the things that you have accomplished, and always looking for ways to get future progress. And, for example, we recently used the FCC's IT Open House to stage a demonstration of a new tool that we started to use. And we kicked off the demonstration by having the Enforcement Bureau Chief discuss how the new tool has accelerated our investigative process. And then we turned over the platform to the chief developer, discussed how the new tool was configured using internal and external data. And then, to finish off the presentation, we had attorneys who came up to the podium and they talked about specific investigations and how the tool had positively impacted them. And so we were able to kind of proactively demonstrate how we partnered with IT to overcome barriers to sharing data within our agency and also with external partners to build this powerful new tool. And I think that this gets at, the point of having demonstrations to a larger community to get them to think about their own issues and the problems that they're having with their data and their systems, so that they in turn feel comfortable in coming to you to discuss these new projects. And I think that, by having that level of comfort, you really are swinging the pendulum of culture in a very positive direction. So before I turn to the next topic, let me just kind of conclude my thoughts on kind of breaking the inertia. I think that you change culture by identifying the pain points in the agency's ability to meet its mission, developing better tools and systems, using the data from the tools and the systems to make better decisions, creating a data community that has input and is listened to, and after you complete a project, demonstrating its usefulness. All right, so moving to poll number, I think this is 3. Just interested in where people in the audience are aligned. Are they A, aligned kind of with the business unit and reporting up kind of the substantive area line of command, or are they B, with IT and the CIO shop? And there we have a 50-50 split, so good. Turning to topic 2, securing buy-in, engaging all levels by successfully communicating the importance and power of data. So who has to buy in? Well, obviously, in the prior slides, I was talking about staff and middle management. And to get their buy-in, they have to understand the problem that you're solving for. And they have to understand the new tool, and they have to understand why they are going through this process of change and that they're listened to and supported. So that's how you get their buy-in. But then you've got people above you. You've got this executive champion that needs to support and kind of put their stamp on the change process and this move into this new data-focused world. And in order to get their buy-in, you need to clearly articulate what the business value is that you are adding. You need to develop realistic milestones with the executive to show that you are, and then you need to show that you are making progress in meeting those milestones. To get their buy-in, you have to explain the improvements and explain how you're hitting the mark and how that is changing the decision-making process. You also need the buy-in from the CIO and the managing director's office. And in order to get them on your side, you must provide detailed, documented requirements and a thorough, in-depth understanding of business operations. If you direct the CIO and IT executives to procure certain technologies and programs without providing the details of the business needs and the possible or the expected return on investment, you will be met with limited success. And as I talked about in the last slide, after they support you in developing a new system or tool or whatever it is, don't forget about them. It is very important that you plan on doing demonstrations to your immediate organization and beyond, demonstrating how the new tools and the systems are better supporting your mission. Because if you do, they not only stay on your side, but they will have a much easier time in allocating funding for your future projects. The security people, CISO, and the privacy office, it's very important that you demonstrate to them, in order to get them on your side, that you understand that your system has things like PII and other sensitive types of information, and that you understand it must be protected, and that you are protecting it, and that you are training your staff in how to protect it. Lastly, that you are actually going through routine testing to identify any vulnerabilities. And if you do have a vulnerability, that you are taking corrective action. And lastly, the human resource department has to understand what you're doing, and they have to buy into your vision. When you introduce new systems, you are likely to have new skills, and those new skills may not be sitting in-house. And you need HR to buy into what you're doing because you are likely to need to bring on a few new people. And if they think that you're staffing your own IT department, it is going to take a lot longer to get those new PDs out published and bring in new people. So this is just a kind of a overview here on this topic. You're going to need to communicate how you're adding value and demonstrate your progress. You communicate early and often, and not only things you're doing right, but also things that you are not doing so right. And that communication has to be going to people above you. It needs to be going to people using the system and the middle managers that are managing the staff. And it needs to be with the CIO and other people in other parts of the commission that have jurisdiction over what you're doing and want to make sure that all kind of the regulatory rules are being checked off. And moving now to the last topic, improving data literacy for all. You want to conduct a skills assessment, but I want to caution, you want to be very careful here. If you know that the new tool or system that you have developed is going to require additional training, you don't want to put out a test that makes people feel stupid. I think that you want to sit down with the consulting agency, give them kind of inside information about your staff and where you think their skills are. Let them kick the tires on the new system or the new tool, and use the assessment more as a way to highlight the new things that are going to be provided and to generate excitement. But on the other side, I mean, obviously, if you have a very technical group, then a skill assessment can identify what level of training is needed so that they're not bored. You obviously need money to do this, so secure a healthy education budget so that your staff is trained. And also expect to provide all levels of training with that budget. I think that there are going to be a lot of people that are satisfied with the entry level and the nuts and bolts, but there are going to be others that want to have advanced training. And in my own experience, I had a 70-year-old electronics engineer who really loved the new system that we developed and came to me for more and more training, and he got certified at the highest level. And it was awesome because here was a person that had been in the agency for over 50 years. He knew everybody, everyone felt comfortable with him, and he had this extremely high level of competency in developing all kind of accelerated tools within the system. And it really freed me up to do other things And I think he really promoted the culture of relying on data and generating more interest because he was really in the trenches and he was so accessible. The last thing that I'll say about kind of the democratization is that once your developers understand the business process and staff and management understand what's kind of required in order to put together meaningful requirements, don't feel like you have to preside over all of their meetings. I think that if there's a new project that is starting to get kicked off, you may kind of introduce the concept and put out kind of the big mile markers. But then as they go through the sprint process and everything else, let them meet. I think that there's a real benefit to having a strong sense of comfort between these two groups. And there's kind of an organic process that really comes out of allowing these meetings to happen in a very relaxed setting. And turning to the FDS, now I talked about the 40 practices that the FDS sets out, but they also provide 10 model principles. And the last 3 of these principles talk about how to set up a learning culture, which obviously will lead to kind of a democratized sense and greater literacy in your group. And I think they really have nailed it with these because, you look at these three principles, investing in learning, developing data leaders, and practicing accountability. And you recognize that, there can't be a learning culture unless there's energy to learn new skills and upgrade systems and technology. And that education needs to be strongly budgeted and funded. And when there are new leaders, they need to be stood up and promoted and heralded. And there needs to be a forum that recognizes and communicates how things are progressing and that the changes, what they've caused and that they are resulting in better decisions. So that does it for me. Return to the Q&A in just a second, but I really like this quote. I think it's true, but I also think it's kind of counterintuitive. What I think Land is getting to here is that people oftentimes confuse collaborate with compromise. And sometimes there really is no room for compromise when doing things like improving data quality and unifying data management. Sometimes in the process of collaboration and building that data culture, one group unfortunately has to give up control and abandon its own systems, its old systems and processes. And that's what makes this job so difficult, but also makes it rewarding. You are disruptive, but if you can make people see why the change is needed, listen to them and support them, then the culture will eventually embrace the data. So thank you very much. I think I now have one last poll to push out. It's kind of a fun poll about, so don't use your smartphones. Who was Edwin Land? Maybe I went too fast. Maybe nobody cares. Poor Edwin Land. Oh, there we go. There we go. He was the founder of Polaroid Corporation. So that does it for me. I think I've left about 10 minutes for Q&A. So if anyone has questions, please go onto the Q&A panel and submit away.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, John. That was a really interesting presentation. And as you say, John, for the audience, if you have questions, please do go on that Q&A, submit them, and we'll get through as many as we possibly can. So the first one that we've had come through here is from Joseph Comier. I believe I pronounced your name there, Joseph. I apologize if I didn't. He says, any suggestions on how business users can get IT staff to be more responsive or accommodating to their requests, i.e. enhancements?
So the way that we do it is any enhancements actually go to me in my office. And I serve as kind of a curator. If I have questions, then I can meet with the requester to put those details together. And if there's any kind of translation that's needed so that when it goes to the IT office, it's put into their vocabulary, then I kind of dress that up as well. And then I submit that to the data council, and then we prioritize it. And what that structure does is, number one, it allows me to first have that discussion with the user to understand how important this is. And if I'm convinced, or others in my office are convinced this is something that is necessary, then it's got our stamp already. And IT doesn't have the they can push back in terms of technical feasibility, but they don't have a real say in whether or not this is something that is necessary for the system, because we've already said, yes, it is necessary. And, especially if we've given it a high priority ranking, then it just becomes a matter of how we can get a developer on that project and how expensive it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. So the next question we have here, we've got one from Elaine King at SurveyMonkey. She says, what tools do you use to get your customer feedback? Thank you.
So we don't have that many customers, not like SurveyMonkey, which, by the way, I really love your tools. I've used them in a lot of my non-professional activities, namely in kind of corralling parents. But in any event, we don't have that much feedback. Most of the feedback that we get is from our users, because I deal with investigators and with engineers that are using our internal systems. So the feedback that we get is generally into an inbox, and it's generally, things that are submitted make it to my desk unless they're kind of help desk type of things that are handled by the more admin side of the help desk.
Yeah, makes sense. And thank you for that question as well. So the next one we have here is this is about metadata. This says, why is metadata not enforced in the public sector, do you think? And I guess a follow-up is, should it be, how can it be, or all those kind of related questions as well?
So again, I am in, my bubble is a little bit different than a lot of the other people in the federal space. I don't interact that much on the public side of things. I mean, I know that our metadata is very closely curated and discussed and defined. I don't know. I don't know the answer to why it's not done in the public space, but my guess is that it can be a little bit of a thorny discussion, and it takes up a lot of energy. I know that it's caused some heated debates in our world, and we're not even that big of a universe. I think that it certainly could and should, but there has to be a lot of dedicated resources into having that discussion.
Absolutely, and I'm sure it's a challenge. So thank you for that question again. We've had a question, a comment from Joe Perez here at the NC Department of Health. He's talking about demonstrating the value of what you're doing, which you touched on in the presentation, John, and how doing that, the more widespread you can make it, the greater the likelihood of support that you're, for the changes that you're trying to bring in. So what was the one top tip that you would give, if you could only give one, about how to demonstrate that value of what you're doing? What would that be?
Well, the top tip, I don't know if it's necessarily related to demonstrating the value of our systems and our projects, but it's having the data council. I think that having a data council where we include all the stakeholders in all the divisions, from the staff level all the way up to management and IT, has allowed us to correctly identify all the things that need to go into our projects and into our enhancements. And it has had the effect of having everyone feel like they have this voice in discussing any enhancements or any problems that they have with our systems. You talk about having a culture that feels empowered and democratized, and having that data council, I think, has been key for us. I can't emphasize just how important it is, and I know that I would not have been able to remain in my position and have as much success and fun as I've had it not been for the existence of the council. So I think that through its existence, it has kind of naturally promoted the things that we have done right, and it has allowed us to have a continued pipeline for having bigger and better projects.
Yeah, that makes sense. I suppose it's all about having that kind of open lines of communication within the council that enables the council, and making sure you've got IT and all the different people that need to be involved in that. So yeah, that's a great tip. I'm sure that people will find that really useful. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid that we have run out of time, but thank you very much for your questions. And thank you, John, again, for your presentation. I think that was really useful, and I'm sure the audience will have taken a lot from it. So thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.